few words about myself, right? So my name is Ronald. I've been with Prudential Services Singapore, as Mikhail just explained, for about 4.5 years. I recently got a new title. That's why I'm very happy to say I'm the head of something, right? I run a small team called Cloud Reliability within Prudential. Okay, we are part of a cloud infrastructure engineering function, and what we do is we basically enable the organization to consume cloud resources, public cloud resources, in a repeatable, reliable, compliant, safe, and secure way. And everything is done in code, right? So we are part of global technology, and we basically support a lot of countries in between Taiwan and Nigeria. And if you were to look at the map, really it's most of the countries that are somehow in between. I try to enable the business to use cloud-based infrastructure in as much of a self-service way as possible, right? We don't want to be in that situation where somebody gets a company credit card and creates their own Azure or AWS account and then starts spinning up virtual machines and somehow, I don't know, saves root passwords on their laptops. We rather follow and enforce a bunch of compliance and security policies and make sure that everything is in line with what our regulators and our legislators are requiring from us. We are financial services after all, and yeah, we just have to take care of this. What I'm going to talk about here a little bit is, there we go, basically the classic problem, right? The reason why we ended up using Grafana is very, very simple, right? We have far too many opinions about how to do monitoring, how to do observability, far too many solutions, far too many tools in the place. And before the meeting earlier today, I was talking to Anthony about this outside, and he was basically echoing that same sentiment, right? Rather than trying to make all of these go away, you just embrace that. And we found that within our team, within the organization as a whole, Grafana is basically a known quantity. We know that we can probably rely on this. We know that we can probably use that to somehow tame that beast a little bit, right? I tried to keep the slide as simple as possible, right? But just to give you an idea, right? Today we are using 2 different public cloud providers. We still have some infrastructure that sits around in various small data centers that are somehow in country. We are using a vast stack of technologies, regardless of how opinionated we are and how much we're trying to advocate and educate our customer base, our client base internally to adopt, let's say, nice cloud-native type of approaches. We're struggling with this, of course, right? You can imagine that there's still a lot of legacy tools around this. All the usual things that you might have heard of in the past, like your BMC TrueSites, and I don't want to go into this. But the point is, right, all of these are basically data sinks that we can hook into, that we can somehow tap into and try to make use out of this. So again, Grafana really here came to the rescue, right? Because we looked at my team in particular, our team in particular, we're huge fans of open source, we're huge fans of open standards and open technologies, and all of the service that we provide is basically built on open source technology. So it's very, very natural for us to look in that space as well, right? We go out, and there's the usual suspects. You have your Grafana stack with your Prometheus, Loki, and all of this kind of stuff. Then maybe we have something like an InfluxDB, and then the other usual suspect here is an Elasticsearch and Kibana stack of some description. So I've got some varying degrees of experience with this, as well as many of my peers and many of my co-workers and collaborators. And we decided ultimately to go with Grafana. The idea here is really simple, right? We think of everything as an experiment. So when we doubled down on Grafana, we said, if it doesn't work in 3 months and 6 months, then we throw it out and we start over. We tried to apply this quote-unquote agile or startup type mentality to that enterprise business that we're part of. Right, so like I said, a lot of the guys in our team already know Grafana or knew it or have had some hands-on experience with this before, so very, very small learning curve. It's brilliant. We have a a huge active community. A lot of the service that we bring and a lot of the engineering that we do traditionally used to be that we would redesign or quote unquote reinvent the wheel, a couple of small wheels, not the whole wheel as a whole, but a couple of small wheels. And we very, very quickly recognized that out in the open source community there are we do a lot with Terraform, and there's a lot of billion Terraform modules out there that we can just reuse, where we just maybe have to bring a small wrapper around this. And then that Terraform module will already, or the developers, the many, many developers of this will have thought of many, many eventualities that might come up with this particular module. It's the same for this stuff, right? The Grafana open source ecosystem is huge. There's so many integrations available. There are so many dashboards that I can immediately import. I'm going to find, if not an outright solution, I'm definitely going to find a lot of inspiration out there. We don't have to ingest any data actively, right? We are big fans of having cloud-native tools in place. So our Azure monitors, your GCP stack drivers, your BigQueries, all of those kind of places. And we're a big fan of having this there because it allows us to use this data transparently over there. If that means I write an Allard rule in Azure, I don't have to somehow fetch this data every 5 minutes. I can do this natively in Azure. And it allows us to scale. Look, we started out with Grafana open source. I've been banging on about open source, right, for the last 5 minutes or so. We started out with a very, very small open source instance, running this as part of a small Helm chart on top of a Kubernetes cluster, and it was working fine. It was honestly, it was okay. It was an interesting learning experience to figure out how to run this HA mode and do all these kind of things. But we needed to put this onto a bit more solid feet, right? From our team's perspective, what we were doing was catching on, right? We were using this to basically try to advocate for a bit of a different way of thinking. And as part of this whole advocacy process, also a larger project within the organization came up, which wanted to double down on Grafana. When we were evaluating that use case and those requirements, and we're just kind of looking back and reflecting on the last 18 or so months that we've been running this ourselves, we realized that there's a number of shortcomings, and there were a number of certain areas where we had to kind of work around a problem or come up with some sort of a workaround. And we really got to the limits of what the open source instance for us can do, right? When I say we spend more time managing Grafana and less time creating and sharing dashboards, that's basically me. I spent far too much time at some point operating our open source instances. We were running multiple because we were trying to implement some sort of development to production promotion process where I've got some guys sitting somewhere in the lab building out some new dashboards, building out some new use cases, and then we were trying to shift them somehow into production. Then we had separate production instance for a specific use case where we're, again, trying to advocate for a particular way of observability. And I ended up spending far more time with this stuff, and every now and then somebody would come up to me and would say, hey, can we do this, can we do that? And I would realize, yes, in theory we can, but that requires us to make some sort of change that's down here that nobody will ever see, that I will not get any credit for, but that will just cost me time, and it may cost me 2 hours or it may cost me 2 days. It's just, it was getting a little bit difficult. Native Terraform, we're huge fans of Terraform, right? I shouldn't say we're huge fans. We recognize that Terraform itself has a lot of limitations as well, but we are using it very, very heavily. We have developed some patterns within the organization that have helped us very well, and we can apply those same patterns to Grafana, to the Grafana cloud-based service, right? There's a native Terraform provider. You can interact with this thing. You can build up your own stacks, can manage resources in there. It's fantastic. And yeah, so we can now actually focus on using this thing rather than having to manage it, rather than having to orchestrate it, right? We like to refer to them as actionable insights, right? Rather than showing somebody that Their CPU utilization is 95%. Well, what am I going to do with this? If I can show them, hey, 30% of those requests going to this particular API gateway are failing, that's something that they find some inspiration in this. They find some motivation in this to actually do something with this. So it's hard to go into some actual, I guess, nitty-gritty, juicy kind of details here. But what we're doing and how we're actually using this is like we took inspiration from the whole agile model, right? Divide and conquer. If somebody were to ask me today, hey, can you write me some sort of Terraform blueprint or manifest or something like that that builds a Grafana stack on top of the cloud and then does RBAC and creates some folders and manages, I don't know, data sources and plugins and all of this kind of stuff. And if I were to try to squeeze this all into a single blueprint, it's not going to work, right? We're going to have some layers of dependencies that we may or may not be able to work around, but far more importantly, right, we're going to make it very, very difficult for ourselves. We're going to, again, find that we're cutting corners. So everything is just layered up. We use, today we use GitHub. We used to use Bitbucket and Jenkins, and we're to use these basically as our execution layer. Today we use GitHub. It doesn't really matter so much. But what's far more important here is that as part of our traditional infrastructure self-service offering, we also do a lot of secrets management, right? You can imagine that with thousands of VMs and hundreds of clusters and managed databases and all of this kind of stuff, there's a lot of credentials that are constantly being created and maybe passwords or keys that have to be constantly rotated. And rather than having any of these secrets stored on someone's laptop or VDI, all of this is tightly integrated with some sort of secrets management in the back end. And we just make use of this here as well, right? So today, I'm in the position where I can offer Grafana as a service for an application team within Prudential. And these would be the 5 steps that I'm going through, right? I would first build out, or I would write some small TF-vars file that helps me to produce a new Grafana stack on Grafana Cloud. And in this, I will specify what plugins I want to install with the exact version. Maybe they want to use Dynatrace. Maybe they want to use some BigQuery or some other Google service or something like that. It's a fairly simple. It's maybe 5 or 6 lines of code. That's really all that it takes. Once this is provisioned, then I can go. I provision this. I create a service account inside of this Grafana instance, and I immediately take those credentials for the service account and I stash them back into my secrets management engine. Then I can run my second layer, and in this second layer, maybe I'm configuring those data sources. Maybe I have, I don't know, 3 different GCP organizations or projects that I have to connect to. So I create 3 instances of this data source, and for each of them, I fetch a different set of service account credentials. I then tie this all into our SSO mechanism just so that end users can just open their browser and then authenticate with their regular day-to-day AD accounts. Then we apply some RBAC controls. Of course, we have a team that builds and manages some dashboards, and then we have maybe myself who sometimes has to go in and do some I don't know, some break glass type of stuff. And then we have our end users. Like I mentioned earlier, there was a rather large project, and I can share a little bit about this project, right? They are running a network operations center style environment where they have a wall of screens basically in a room, and a lot of those screens are showing Grafana dashboards today. So for that, we're using their regular unprivileged accounts to access this kind of stuff. And again, this is all managed inherently. Today, we do not manage dashboards in code. To be honest, I tried this in the past with the open source instance, and I was asking Jim about this after his last session here a few minutes ago, because he briefly touched on this, right? The actual problem that I had, I believe I mentioned this very, very early. We were running multiple self-hosted open source instances of Grafana, and the idea was that I have a sandbox environment where I give my dashboard developers wide-ranging access. They can basically do whatever they want. They can basically go completely nuts, and they can build a new, nice, shiny dashboard for me. And then we try to establish some promotion process to move this dashboard from this non-prod environment, from the sandbox environment, into some production environment. And if you know anything about this, you know that you will have to somehow sanitize this old dashboard. You will have to, in essence, do search and replace on data source IDs. And if, as we do it, we work with anywhere between, I want to say maybe 12 different data sources today across all the different technologies, right? Again, it gets very difficult to manage. And then naively, hey, we're using Terraform. Terraform has a templating engine built in. We can kind of do this. But again, I'm coming back to this point where I'm operating Grafana more, or operating some aspect of Grafana more, rather than actually focusing on building this dashboard. Grafana itself has a built-in mechanism to sort of do that, to simplify this process a little bit. And for the moment, we're doing this manually. But anyway, everything ideally is infrastructure as code. At this point, I treat Grafana as my cloud platform, and a folder, an RBAC role assignment, or something like that in this Grafana I treat as infrastructure in exactly the same way as we do this elsewhere. Right, so the journey so far, right? Like I just mentioned, we have a crap ton of data sources and a crap ton of data in there. We're across 2 clouds. We are using Prometheus. We are building, I've written some custom integrations. I can share, for instance, we're using some VPN concentrators from a popular networking vendor. And we were asked to monitor VPN end user capacity. So again, as you can imagine, there's some licenses involved here. For site A, I buy 250 licenses, and I want to see on an everyday basis how many of those 250 licenses am I using. That thing does SNMP, but for a number of reasons, SNMP didn't quite work out. So again, we're in an open source world. They have a regular REST API that I can plug into. I can evaluate the output, and I can maybe just stash this in Prometheus. So we do a lot of that. We plug into some of our enterprise legacy tools. Right? We plug into Salesforce today, and that's part of this Command Center initiative. We are, again, from what I touch and what I work with most, we are dealing with infrastructure, telemetry data, infrastructure logs, and traces. But there's a huge demand, of course, for Dynatrace, for application performance management within the organization. And we are bringing, again, some opinions here and some suggestions on how we can do this. And we are standardizing the integration with Grafana already. Similar to what I just explained with where I read some sort of capacity data out of some VPN concentrator, we're doing the same thing with InfluxDB, right? Infrastructure self-service, by definition, means that we have hundreds, thousands of cloud resources that are not directly under our management, but from where we gather event data that's constantly happening, right? People are constantly managing their own stacks. They're constantly making changes to this. Maybe they're adding firewall rules. Maybe they're removing VMs. Maybe they're scaling up or scaling down some stuff. We have a ton of event data that we capture with Influx. We recently migrated from Bitbucket to GitHub. Again, open source, the world, it's already there. Somebody has already done that integration for us. Somebody has already given us some inspiration of what we can do with this. So we integrate with this. It's a bit hard to see, but we do custom JSON data sources, right? So we use this Infinity data source, which is really, really good. We have I like to call it a metadata service that we run, that we operate ourselves. And this data service is there to help us tag, let's say, a virtual machine to a specific business unit and stuff like that. And we can query this one directly. So actionable insights, right? And this is, again, while I'm a big believer of dashboards, I feel like showing a lot of dashboards to you guys here, they're going to be completely out of context. It's very, very difficult to actually bring the meaning of this. But this is an example of one of those actionable insight dashboards that we created, right? Rather than well, typically the idea here would be to say, okay, I don't want to highlight all of the positives. I actually want to focus in on the negatives, right? I want to identify all of those things where there's room for improvement, maybe where there's something going wrong. But if I were to build a dashboard that only shows where things are going wrong, only shows where things are red, I'm going to struggle portraying a message because I'm going to have numbers that are, well, I'm going to have numbers like this. I mean, I have maybe a 3 or a 2, and it's going to be a little bit out of context. So when we say actionable insights, what we try to bring is we try to bring large overviews, right, where we run some sort of automated process and where we can very, very easily demonstrate that the vast majority of this is working, and we have a few small ones that we have to dive into a little bit deeper. Again, I mean, this is a token rotation dashboard. What I was referring to earlier also, the amount of resources, the amount of credentials that are flowing through some aspects, some layer of our system is far greater than anyone could manage personally, individually. There are thousands of these, and we need to rotate their credentials on a regular basis. So this is something that we're very, very closely attached to, but of course there's a lot of other stuff in here where maybe our clients are doing something that we can just simply observe with this. Right, so to try to bring this to some sort of conclusion, right? Where we started out, we had, again, I cannot count how many because there's different things to different people, but we had very, very varying sources for observability and monitoring data. And we've tried to do a lot of things with them. We've always been a strong believer to leave the source data where it is because it brings certain advantages, whether they're financial or whether they're operational. There are certain advantages. There's certain benefits from, again, leaving a log in an Azure Log Analytics workspace. But we also wanted to have the ability to just sort of combine these things, right? I want to be able to show something from GCP and something from Azure or something from a database or something on the same screen. And this is what this allows us to do, right? We can scale this across multiple technology stacks. We can scale this across multiple business units. It doesn't matter what we want to scale this across, but we can simply scale. Yeah, I mean, this is okay, fine. This is what I wanted to share with you guys today. I hope it wasn't too high level. I hope you got something out of this. I believe we do have a few minutes if you have any questions.
Wait, we have a mic here for you.
So you have two public clouds and some workload on a data center also, right?
Yes.
So that all you are managing on this one dashboard, or it's like
No, oh no, okay. I mean, if this wasn't clear, we have multiple different dashboards, right? And maybe I should have touched on this. Okay, we use Grafana for multiple different personas, right? We are targeting some senior management who wants to have some sort of high-level strategic overview. But we're also, of course, thinking about our developers, our technical, our engineering user base. And the nice thing about this is, right, depending on my desire of how much data I want to expose, I can share with them that maybe we have a separate dashboard that dives in a little bit deeper. I can instruct them on how to inspect the actual data that sits behind a query, that sits behind a pie chart. I have a simple pie chart somewhere. I can show them how they can see that raw data from behind, how they can maybe dive a little bit deeper and go back to the source system if that is somehow already publicly available within the organization. So we have today probably something to the tune of 50 different dashboards. And there's anything from ad hoc troubleshooting maybe some sort of a major incident for which we want to build some sort of small custom visualization or some sort of small custom dashboard, to long-running initiatives where we're observing some trends that go over the space of a month or a year or things like that. It's anything in between.
Yeah, hi. Do you guys use this Grafana for incident management also, or just for dashboard and alerting?
We do. And once again, I mean, what we've been doing for a long, long time, right, is we've been managing alerts, alert policies across the multiple clouds or across the multiple source systems. Right, so you can create an alert policy in Azure, you can create some sort of alert policy in GCP, I mentioned this earlier, BMC TrueSight is basically the legacy monitoring tool that does exactly that. And we plug this into Grafana, right? We are using this to, again, try to derive some more knowledge, some more insights from these alerts. And a simple thing here would be, can we somehow visualize which technology stacks or which business units or maybe which subsets of some of our stack are generating the most traffic, generating the most noise in terms of incidents. Is that the sort of area that you're asking about, that you're interested in?
Yeah, I mean, because we understand Grafana also do incident management, so I was just trying to understand if you guys use that or no. I mean, I understood it's more about analytics, so you guys use Grafana, right?
Yes, today it's primarily an analytics tool and a visualization tool, of course. We have dabbled with some of the alert manager in there as well, but other than that, you're absolutely right. We don't do that much more just yet.
Right,
we have many ideas and many opinions about this, right? But again,
thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So what I understood is mostly you are doing the cloud infrastructure monitoring using Grafana. So what would you say that the key differentiator using Grafana than the standard cloud infrastructure monitoring capabilities? The GCP has its own, and then Azure has their own tools, and now we have some FinOps tools which work across the cloud providers.
Mm-hmm. Okay, for that to explain, maybe you would I would have to take half a step back and say. Like I mentioned in the introduction, right? We're present in many countries. We're present in many different business units, and the way this manifests within the multiple different cloud service providers is with many different cloud accounts, with many different cloud subscriptions, and the vast majority of this cloud native monitoring stuff or observability stuff is scoped to those cloud accounts. We literally have the requirement to be able to demonstrate this cross-regionally, across multiple regions, across multiple countries and business units and things like that. So this is one big aspect. The second one is this, right? If you look at your actual cloud resources, today it doesn't actually matter if you're interested in running Kubernetes. As an end user, as a client, does it matter to you if that Kubernetes cluster runs in GCP, whether that's a GKE, whether that's an EKS in AWS, whether that's an AKS in Azure? It doesn't actually matter, right? At the end of the day, we're just using cloud as an abstraction layer. Ultimately, what we want to do is we want to run some sort of an application that brings some value to someone, right? Whether it brings value to us or some client, it doesn't matter. But ultimately, we're using cloud infrastructure just as an abstraction layer. And once we're past this abstraction layer, we can try to at least aspire to unify again to a certain degree. Of course, it depends largely to what type of data you have available to play with, to visualize. But it's getting better. And again, through the many efforts, OpenTelemetry was discussed earlier, right? Through those standardization efforts, these things are getting more and more plausible today.
Thank you.